Yeah, I was off. It just happened to be a day off. Had plans that my parents were going to come up and visit and see the kids and see my wife. And I was in the car with my daughter, who at the time was about 18, 19 months old, going to a store to pick up some food for the afternoon, and stopped at a red light and realized that there was no music on the radio, which was odd at 10 o'clock in the morning. Turned the radio up, and it's a DJ interviewing this woman, and she's explaining that a plane just hit one of the World Trade Center towers.
Fire and water me, going down deep, sing, oh, oh, bury me, carry me, oh, oh, far beneath, oh, oh, fire and water me, watching me bleed, give me secret, yeah. Oh, give me secret, down to the river. Down to the river.
Hi, and welcome again to another episode of Sheepdog and Shepherd. I'm Vaughn Cleem, co-host with Kyle Reyes. Everybody knows Kyle. Kyle, say hi to your guest today.
What's up, everybody? You know, for those of you who have never seen this show before, Sheepdog and Shepherd is all about God's hand in law enforcement. As we all know, law enforcement and law and order are biblical at their very core. Really excited to have my friend Tom on. We've had Tom on choir practice. Tom and I were inducted into the National Law Enforcement Hall of Fame at the same time. We were both back this year to then introduce other people and induct other people into the Hall of Fame. But man, we never really got an opportunity to dive into the role of God in your career. So why don't we dive in with a little backstory about who you are? And I overheard you sharing a story about September 11th that I had never heard of before. I think that's probably a great place to kick off.
Yeah, you know, I did 30 years in the NYPD, and mainly because of my dad and growing up watching him and watching him perform at such a high level and wanting to be that. The 70s cop shows helped also, watching them and wanting to be like them. But, you know, faith was always a big part with my dad. I think he went to church every day, had his rosary beads and a picture of the Sacred Heart in his wallet that he then passed to me when I graduated the police academy, and I carried forever. And it's a big part because I just think there's a greater being, there's a greater person looking out for us other than ourselves and others that you need to rely on, because he has the overall say in what's going on. And you have to realize that. Things don't happen by chance. Things aren't random. Things are done for a reason. And everything happens for a reason. And it's by his hand that reason comes through. And you know, if you're guided by that and just have an understanding of duty and honor and service that I think all of us should have, whether you're a rookie or you've been doing it for 30 years, and understanding that that's a responsibility, and a responsibility we shouldn't take lightly.
You mentioned, selfless service, duty, which always reminds me, there's always this push. Like, we got to change the culture of policing. We've got this big effort to change the culture of policing, which is always offensive to me, because I thought, what culture did you grow up in policing? And I've listened to your stories and the stories of how you saw New York PD, how you were inspired by your father and the selflessness that he demonstrated. What was that? How would you describe the culture of policing that drew you in? It wasn't this negative thing that we keep being told we have to change, right?
No, it was family. I mean, I said it earlier, I said it on other shows. I still, to this day, talk to one of my dad's partner's family. That was 60 years ago that they worked together, 50 years ago. And I still talk to their families. And that's what it was. You know, going as a young kid, going to a Yankee game, we would always, before the game, stop at one of the precincts he worked at. The 4-4, the 4-1, whatever it might have been, to visit people he worked with and to watch how they acted with each other, and how it was not, okay, John's here, cool, how are you? It was get up out of your desk, hug, This is my son. Oh my God. And just instantly becoming part of that. Even at 8, 9, 10 years old, you were looked upon as part of their family. You know, it wasn't just John Smith, it wasn't Smitty, it was his family, was part of theirs. And seeing how that worked and wanting to be part of that was a big draw to it. The excitement, the shield, uniform, all that, obviously, yes. But having another family to rely on and be part of was just as much a draw.
So 9/11, you're out in your car and you're listening to the radio. Walk us through that day.
Yeah, I was off. It just happened to be a day off. Had plans that my parents were going to come up and visit and see the kids and see my wife. And I was in the car with my daughter, who at the time was about 18, 19 months old, going to a store to pick up some food for the afternoon, and stopped at a red light and realized that there was no music on the radio, which was odd at 10 o'clock in the morning. Turn the radio up and it's a DJ interviewing this woman, and she's explaining that a plane just hit one of the World Trade Center towers. So I immediately looked out my windshield and went, wow, how'd they screw that up? Because it was such a gorgeous day. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. And thinking that it was just a tourist plane or helicopter or something that hit the side of the building. And just kind of continuing on and checking on one of my friends who I knew worked down there. A couple of phone calls were made to make sure he was okay. And it ended up he wasn't even there. He was at one of the main offices, another building. So he wasn't even in the trade center. So at that point, I just went, okay, he's all right. We're good. Then the woman on the radio starts hysterically screaming on the radio. And the DJ can't stop her from screaming. He's in a studio, so he doesn't really know what's going on either. And all of a sudden, she gets the word out that another plane just hit the other building. And right there, I knew, okay, something's wrong. I do a U-turn in the parking lot, call my partner right away. And I said, hey, what's going on? And he doesn't even answer me. He just says, where are you? I said, I'm with Nikki. I got to get my family straightened out. He goes, okay, just do that. And Carlson and I were tight. I mean, we were partners in narcotics, in the gang, in the robbery squad. He knew my family. I knew his. All good. He said, all right, get everyone straightened out. Come get me. So we did that, picked him up, and went right down to ground zero. And there's chilling things that happen in our careers that are unexplainable about how you feel or the vision of what you're seeing. You know, a child hurt, a car accident, something. And nothing could have gotten you ready or prepared you for that scene by any stretch. I don't care how much time you had on the job, how many traumatic events you went through in your career or your life. Nothing prepared you for what you saw and what was even in the future. You know, not just that moment, but what we were going to have to endure as a city, as a cop, and then the calling afterwards with the Joint Terrorism Task Force in my career and all that. But that was something you won't forget. The smell, the look, watching military jets bank around Manhattan, which you've never seen. The military presence and the knowledge that the world just changed was really, really dramatic.
Tom, I know I have to proceed with caution here because there's only so much you can talk about, and I don't want you to get another knock on the door. But your time at NYPD and that moment led to a very large international investigation. What can we say about that without getting you arrested?
Well, there was the case of 9/11 would never stop. You know, so there was always just things that you looked at and proceeded forward with, and just other terrorism acts. You know, the big responsibility in JTTF was making sure that didn't happen again. That was our goal, and that was our calling. You know, we had to make sure that never happened again. And the one thing that you learned in the terrorism world is everyone's connected. If one group was involved here, they sure as hell were involved here. And this person was in the middle. And then they crossed. It was an endless crisscross of things that we would continue to find of bad guys and money trails and organizations that were just hell bent on doing it again, whether it was here or just another American entity somewhere in the world. But there was so much crisscross with bad guys was really revealing.
There are, over the years, there have been people who have had a lot of very different perspectives about 9/11. And it kind of got to the point where you couldn't raise questions about what happened on 9/11 without being called crazy or a conspiracy theorist or disrespectful to the families of the fallen. But then there were certain things that stood out to people, like the planes were incinerated, and yet the passports of one of the hijackers was found unmarked in the rubble. Do you think it's unfair for people to have questions about what happened as a first responder on that day?
I think I don't have a problem with questions. It's what's the question? Sure. You can question anything you want because no one should think the same way. Right. That's why we are who we are. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has a certain view of something that happened. We've all experienced it going to a crime scene. You could talk to 4 people and get 4 people different accounts of what happened at a scene. And I don't think that's any different. Opinions are good. Discussions are good. Conversations are good. It's just when it gets to an absurd point.
Denial.
Right. Where you start to, all right, this isn't the conversation I need to have. Yeah. Listen, and by your point, Kyle, I can truly attest to being at the landfill in Staten Island where all the debris from Ground Zero was taken to. And it was our task to go through everything and to find IDs, to unfortunately things that we had to identify and put in a certain bag or a bucket. There were points of the Staten Island landfill that were worse than Ground Zero and working down there. But I can tell you, not everything got incinerated. We found IDs, we found purses, we found wallets, of people who were incinerated. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen because their ID is okay. We found gun belts from some of the cops who were killed. They were gone, but their gun belt is fully intact.
That's crazy.
Firemen who got, ripped apart, but their Scott packs were fine. There were things that none of us are going to ever be able to explain, but they did happen.
How'd your faith guide you through this?
It was a lot of, praying it never happened again, praying for so many victims. People who weren't even there were victims. You could have been up on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, not near there, but if you were in New York that day, you were a victim because it was your city. And the faith of just hoping that never happened again and praying for the victims' families and what they were going to have to endure. That wasn't one day. And this wasn't going to be over in a day. Okay, now it's September 12th, everything's okay. It's September 11th, 2025, we're still feeling it. And not just me, but I'm sure the thousands and thousands of people's faith changed that day, where they thought of one thing and they'll think of something else. But I think it was so necessary to have that inner strength to get through what we had to get through. Like I said earlier, there's reasons for things and an overreaching person who's looking out for us, and that you had to draw on.
So Tom, you had a unique experience of seeing what policing looked like, right? Very rules-based, like we understand the process. And then you started to see some of what happens when you start doing terrorism investigations. So one of the things when I was working the Terrorism Criminal Investigations Unit, I was doing just the legal side. And what I realized is we have overlaid a level of civilization that people don't realize. When I was looking at these cases and asking, and my job was to decide, is this a case that we can prosecute somebody or put together a kill package on somebody, right? When you're looking at that and you realize when the military gets involved, when it becomes terrorism, it's almost easier than to build a case than to build a kill or capture package, right? And what that made me think, I was like, God is looking down on this, thinking our rules-based system is pretty funny to him. Like the violence and the inhumanity and the evil that is actually controlling a lot of what's going on, we've tried to put structure to. And I think when we started to see those cases intersect between what terrorism and war and domestic policing look like, we start to see all those lines get blurred. Was that anything that you were seeing as you were navigating both the domestic side and then the international side?
Yeah, it was tough to do because, like you said, putting targeting packages together on human beings was not what you start your NYPD career thinking. Get the bad guy in the corner, okay. But then God's will, like I said, everything happens for a reason, that you get placed into these. And I tried not to overthink what we were doing. I tried to keep it very simple. And the plan was, bad guy, what do we need to do to get him? Whether it was a kidnapping, whether it was a crackhead on the corner, whether it was someone that wanted to blow the world up. Bad guy. Just get him. And sometimes it was easy to do that. And sometimes it took a little more of, all right, I'm going to have a say or a plan into this person getting eliminated. And the way I kind of thought of it was, God doesn't like evil. He's against evil. And if I can help that, I'm in.
A few years ago, I was out in Tucson, Arizona with my best buddy, Eli Crane, who you guys know. He's a congressman now. He's a former SEAL sniper. And we were out at dinner and we're having cocktails and having a great time. And I said, hey, when we get back to your house, let's do a video. And he was like, yeah, cool. What are we going to talk about? I said, you're going to talk about killing people. He was like, yeah, no, I'm not. I literally don't talk about that with anybody but you and my wife. I said, yeah, that's why you need to. And he was like, why do I need to? And you could see he was getting pissed. I said, because you've been able to do something that a lot of other guys have failed at doing, which is reconciling your faith with what you had to do. Right. And we're losing a lot of guys to their own hand because they haven't figured out how to balance that. So convinced him to do it. He wasn't happy. You could see it in the beginning of the video. And then he just started talking from a scripture-based perspective about what that experience was like for him. Mm-hmm. And to summarize, and maybe we'll include a little clip of it in here, he said when he was looking down through that scope and he had someone who was a known terrorist, who had a 12-year-old walk a suicide vest into a group of soldiers and set themselves off. When he had that person in their scope, he just knew that he had to send that demon back to the pits of hell. And it was up to God to ultimately decide what their ultimate fate was. Right. And he said for them, death and killing was never something that you took lightly. You never should take that lightly, but that sometimes there's an evil that the only way of dealing with it is by exterminating it.
It's real. It's there, whether you want to see it or not. And oftentimes he used men to destroy evil. He used warriors to destroy what was evil. And in that way, I've always kind of seen myself as a servant. And that's why it really doesn't bother me.
It's something that a lot of guys have confided in us that they struggle with. Is I've had to do terrible things in my career, but terrible becomes a relative term when you're talking about sacrificing evil to save innocence.
Right. And you know what? A lot of it is, you don't think, the military is one thing, law enforcement's another. When those combine is when it gets scary in your own head. Because like I said, when you join the NYPD as a 22-year-old, I want to chase a guy down the street and lock him up. Okay, great. Then as your career evolves and a calling is made to you to join a unit that now is cops, feds, military, and your complete package of what you thought you were going to do in your career changes. And you know what? I tell, when I go and speak down the academy to new detectives, I make it a point to tell them that. I said, you have to be prepared for your entire life to change 5 minutes from now, because it can. You can have a set rule. This is the way I am. This is how I'm going to work. And if you're good at what you do and get asked to go to another level and you accept that, you have to adjust and you have to reconcile that with yourself in what you're going to maybe be participating in. And I was able to do that. I was able to just say, you know what? It's not just, hey, gung-ho, I want to do that. There's a reason I'm here. And I truly mean that. I've said it on so many occasions to myself, to my family. There's a reason for everything. Things happen for a reason. And when you get put into a position to make those calls, there's a reason for it. Because even God needs a hand with exterminating evil. He can't do it all. He needs helpers, he needs soldiers, and if we can help in that, so be it.
I mean, I think he can do it all. He just taps us to walk in obedience to what he's called us to do. Right. And that's why, you answered that call and you ran to ground zero. That's why Eli answered that call and he went to Iraq and Afghanistan. That's why he's answered that call and fundamentally impacted the lives of countless officers across the country. Big shout out now, your podcast, your company. What's going on there?
Gold Shields is our podcast.
Heard you got a killer new sponsor.
Yeah, we do. Goals really stepped up. I mean, in a way that we were, I don't want to say not prepared for, but it was a nice surprise. When you start these shows, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know where you're going to be. And thankfully, with the help of God, we're 3 years into it. 127, 128 shows when we had 7 scheduled in the beginning of this run. But you know what? It's, again, for a reason. And the show, we love the show because there's a message to it. It's not just, hey, let's interview this person. There's a reason for the interview. And the reason is telling that person's story and having that person tell their own story so other people can experience that policing's not easy, the military is not easy, the mental health issues that take place on both fronts is real. And for someone to come on a camera and come on a show and explain the hardships, the demons, what things they had to do that they never imagined doing, and telling that story so other people can realize that this is real and these people are real. That it's not a movie, it's not a TV show. And that's what we really honor our guests with getting their stories out there. And it's been a great ride. And we're continuing to do it.
I love it, man. I love seeing how Gauls have stepped up too. They're bringing us out to Kentucky to take a tour of their DC. You'll be out there. Yep. Meg from the Law Enforcement Hall of Fame is going to be out there. They're their title sponsor. Yeah. Gauls is sponsoring the Big Blue Bash at Mar-a-Lago that we're putting on. It's just great to see a company that's got such longevity of supporting the law enforcement space that's growing with their audience. It's now, there's a younger demographic, the next gen of law enforcement that's entered into this space. So law enforcement today is working with them to do a 30 under 30 campaign where we're looking for 30 young officers under the age of 30 and looking for people to go nominate them. So it's just exciting to see a brand that's been around forever continuing to evolve.
Oh, it's amazing to have a company. Listen, backing law enforcement is not popular these days. And for Gauls, the company that they are and the support that they show, Mike Fadden is just epic with what he does in just saying, no, that's my guys and girls, and I got their back. And you can say whatever you want, write about me, fine, but I'm going to have their back. And for them to jump on board with not a product, but a show like ours, because of what we do and because of what we stand for and the stories that we have, and to back us on that end is incredible. And then what you mentioned about being part of the Hall of Fame, who both of us means a lot to. Megan and Adam and what they do, they're such close friends, and the sacrifices they make in order to do and get the Hall of Fame to where it is. And now to have Gauls backing is just tremendous. And I'm so proud to just be part of that organization.
Amen to that. Parting thoughts?
Yeah, we keep hearing the same theme, and that is, it reminds me, I don't know how anybody can do this job without God, right? I mean, I don't know how you can preach resiliency and mental health and survival and thriving through that entire career unless you had God walking alongside you the whole way. And we keep meeting person after person with that same story, whether they know it or not. That's who they relied on, because you hit a point where, you know, I think expert decision makers have two qualities. One is they stay calm in chaos and they're comfortable in uncertainty. Well, when you get to that point where you're looking at your version of ground zero, where you just cannot make sense of it. There's no certainty, there's no predictability. You only have one place to turn, right? And when you can turn to that and get through that moment, then there's a lot more suffering that you're going to be in place to relieve, which is, I think, why we do it, right? We're all there to relieve suffering, maybe in that moment, whoever we meet. And I keep hearing that through all of these stories, and I hear it again in yours. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
No, absolutely.
It reminds me a lot of Romans 5:3, which talks about growth through pain, right? Like when we go to the gym, the way that we lift, it hurts sometimes, and it's not always fun. Unless you're a sucker for punishment like we are, but the growth comes as a result of that pain. And the most difficult times that we go through, whether it's in your career in law enforcement or personally, people who aren't in law enforcement but are suffering through difficult times right now, we get stronger and we grow greater through that pain. And so I think it's just something to keep in mind as guys are struggling or perhaps in a dark place right now. I think the best thing you do is spend some time in the Word. Best advice that was given to me is when you wake up in the morning and you grab your phone, don't doom scroll. Maybe spend some time in the Word and find a passage in the Bible and kind of dive into what that means to you. And it has been absolutely transformative for me to do that instead of starting my day by being ticked off of the world because I opened up a Facebook post and saw someone who loves Hillary Clinton still. So.
Right. And you know what? And to realize in the end what's important, what's real in this world, what's important in the end, where are we all going to be?
Yeah.
That's the important part.
I know where we're going to be. Do you guys know where you're going to be? Thank you all so much for watching this episode of Sheepdog and Shepherd. Brother, thanks for coming on. Thanks for being an amazing co-host, as always. It's a pleasure. God bless you all. God bless America.
There's one part of almost every building that intruders target first: the glass. Even $1 million in locks and cameras won't matter if someone can break through a window in seconds. Our 15 mil security laminate reinforces your glass, buying you time when every second counts. Whether at home, at school, or on the job, if keeping your people and property safe is your priority, this is something you can't afford to overlook. Call today for your free security consultation. And to make things even better, on any project over 250 square feet, we'll donate $1,000 in additional laminate because your safety matters to us.